Are you putting on muscle mass or are you not? Right?
You know, we can count calories forever, right?
Yeah.
It's so boring.
I don't think counting calories is the best or first approach.
We keep falling into the same mistakes over and over.
What looks balanced for me might not be balanced for someone else. Stop being inconsistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, here we are with my friend and client, Phil Wittmer. It's an honor having you here, and I know you have a tight schedule, so thank you very much for coming here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This time we're in a different situation. Normally I'm cutting your hair, and this time we just face to face, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to talk through the mirror.
Yeah, that's right.
So thank you for coming. And yeah, I went through your life a little bit here, your biography, and I read a bunch of things here but most of it I don't even know what it is, even though I did a quick research. But I thought, you know what, it's better if you introduce yourself.
Sure.
So yeah, let us just tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and yeah, we just jump right to the question.
Okay. Yeah. So, trainer and lifestyle coach is kind of what I'd label myself as. I've been doing it for about 20 years. My mom was a very big influence on me early on. She's a nutritionist and wellness coach, and so had a big influence on me. And eventually, I stepped into it and wanted to learn more and do it as a profession. And so, yeah, the big thing for me is I'm very curious, continue to be curious, and just want to learn more about not just strength training, but health, lifestyle, and how to coach people and really figure out how to make changes for people, I think is a big one for me. And so, you know, I'm not going to jump into all the different people I've learned from, but I think the theme is curiosity and learning different approaches and different modalities in order to help people with their health and lifestyle.
Okay, that sounds great. So I think we can just start with the questions, because
Let's jump
it
into
took
it.
us longer than expected to set up everything. You know, for the first episode of this new podcast, and it took longer than expected. So yeah, let's jump to the first questions. So first of all, how do you approach to a client who trains with you, who wants to train with you for the first time? Like, do you follow any sort of specific protocol regardless of their goals, or how do you approach to clients?
Yeah, there is a bit of a protocol. I first want to get to know them, who they are, a little bit about their history, and where they want to go. And that will dictate how much information I gather. But ultimately, at first, it's always collecting information, so I have the best chance of helping them right off the bat. So that can be, again, just a sit down and different questionnaires I can take them through, or they do on their own time to gather more information. And then from there goes into movement assessment, some deeper assessments depending on what's going on. Sometimes you'll also get a referral from a physio or someone, and then I'd want to take a look at that and get their input. So it really depends on the person and where they want to go, but there's always information collecting, sometimes more basic, sometimes a little bit more extensive, depending on who it is and where they want to go.
So they're going through under training with physiotherapists, or they're doing regular check-ins with the doctor. You work with them as well?
Yeah.
Or you just collect the information through the client?
No, it can happen in both ways. I would prefer to have communication with a physiotherapist or a doctor because I appreciate their insight. And plus, I think that's the best way to help someone if there's ongoing communication, depending on where they are in that journey. But for me, and especially being here in Vancouver and having done it for a while in the city, I've been able to establish some relationships with different therapists. And so it's really nice because we have a good understanding, and that communication, I find the ongoing communication just ends up helping the client that much more, as opposed to just getting some information and then, you're not in touch with that practitioner.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, you get the information, from the specialist rather than filter through the client, which can misinformation or hide some information sometimes, because that's what we do. Sometimes we lie to the doctor or our physiotherapist for some reason.
100%.
It can happen, right? So that's clever.
And it's nice to be able to bounce ideas off each other both ways, you know?
Yeah, makes sense. Would you say you're specialized in specific type of exercises more than others, or you pretty much cover everything?
No, I think, I mean, for the most part, I would say, you know, general health and strength. I've worked with some professional athletes, but I wouldn't say I specialize in that.
Okay.
And no specific modality per se. Again, how I opened, I'm very curious. And so I've learned a lot of different approaches, and I try and use that toolbox to help whoever I see. But I think for the most part, yeah, just general strength training and health is yeah, a pretty general approach.
Okay. So how about let's talk about diet a little bit about. I mean, when I mean diet, is just food in general, right? Because sometimes diet scares people, right? The word diet. So do you introduce diet to every one of your clients? Like, for example, is there any basic nutrients that you would recommend to everybody, and then you customize it from there based on their body type or any other things?
So again, it depends. Because I'm like a nutrition coach, like I've done some education there, but I'm not a registered dietitian. So I'm mindful with my scope of practice and what I can and cannot do. But again, I'm open to that. With some people come to me and they're strictly looking to improve their fitness, and they're not as interested in the nutrition side of things. Of course, to me, they're always correlated. So I'll touch base on it if I feel like it's an important piece in regards to their journey and what results they're looking for. But it's not something I would tackle with everyone. And then if someone is open to that, then we start with sort of, foundational nutrition coaching. What are they doing? Like, what's their understanding of nutrition? What habits do they currently have? Again, what are their goals? How does that correlate? And are there some things that we can start taking a closer look at?
So I'm curious about something else. What if, do you adapt yourself to their lifestyle? I explain myself with this. What if they're a vegetarian or vegan and they don't want to get out of their way because whatever reason they have? Can you adapt your protocol to them, or you try to recommend them do other things that are different from their lifestyle, or you pretty much try to adapt as much as you can?
I'm pretty adaptable. I'm not here to really push my agenda on anyone or like my own perspective or my own philosophy. I'll always share with people what has worked for me or what has worked with other clients or any other experiences that are relevant to them. But I try and be as adaptable as possible. Then, depending on what they're doing, there's certain things that I might share based on what they're trying to do and what their current strategy is. So if it's someone that is a vegan or vegetarian, right, we want to look at, hey, you might be not getting certain nutrients, and we want to take a look at that and make sure they're just aware of that.
Okay. And do you think you can find a way to adapt to them? Like, for example, if you think they're not taking enough nutrients or whatever, can define them, like with supplements or I mean, I guess in these days, we have lots of options, right, where people can complete, their nutrients that they need.
That's right. And then it just becomes a conversation, like a coaching conversation around some awareness and what they're willing to do. And again, I don't make hard recommendations. I just they're open recommendations and more of a discussion in terms of where they're at and where they want to go and things they should consider.
So do you see a lot of people trying to get better, and but they keep falling, or we keep falling into the same mistakes over and over? What I mean by mistakes are like habits that we've been accumulating over the years, and it's really hard to stop, overnight. And some people keep going, and they might listen to you, but some other people just give up, or they give up saying that, oh, I can't, this is harder than I thought it would be, or they become lazy or whatever. And some others might even blame the trainer, because I heard that before, like, oh, you're not doing properly, I'm not losing weight, or whatever the problem is. And you as a specialist, okay, this is not on my side, I'm doing my best, you're not doing your best, this is on your side, because you don't want to break, these habits, or you're not doing enough homework. So have you seen this, you've been through this situation?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this is...
How do you deal with that?
Well, this is why I have a huge interest in the coaching side of things, because you could have a perfect nutrition plan, a perfect program. If the person's not executing that, it doesn't matter. And so then it's more about like, okay, how do I help get this person to that result? And that's a big coaching thing, and behavioral change is the bigger piece, as opposed to the strength training program and counting calories and dialing in your macros. And so again, it depends on the person and if they're open to that. Because again, some people will come see me and they're like really strict on the programming, and you address some of these things, but they might not be open to that. But in my experience, the most effective way is through this coach approach and asking powerful questions that make them reflect on what they're doing. And also, I mean, a trainer would anyways, to a certain degree, hold them accountable and really make it clear to them what's happening, right? Like, okay, you're saying you want to do this, and we're trying to implement these changes. It's not happening. And a big thing with that coach approach, I think, is starting very small. It can be very overwhelming for people to make big lifestyle changes. And so what's the smallest, most tangible, like easy yes that we can find and get a win, and then start building momentum off of that?
I'm always curious about something, when with the counting calories, and I've heard so many opinions, from professionals. I mean, lots of podcasts that I listen to, and you can hear a completely opposite opinions. From you have to count your macros to it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter what you count, because you're never going to be accurate. I was listening to this doctor, don't remember his name, but he was saying just by breathing, sitting down and breathing, you burn it. I don't remember the number, but it was ridiculous. Like per minute, the amount of calories you burn in per minute, you go through the day, it's ridiculous. So it's like you're counting calories or counting your macros, how many calories you take or you burn. It's not even close to the real number. But even with that, you still recommend people to have a minimum idea what we put in the body and how much comes in and out, or how do you approach it, and for how long the person has to do that? Because we can count calories forever, right?
Yeah.
It's so boring.
Yeah. And again, it's an estimate, as a lot of things in this space are. It's very hard to be super specific unless it comes to like lifting weights, and we know you lifted that weight.
Yeah, exactly.
But my approach, unless someone is an advanced trainee, so either like they're a professional athlete, or they're doing something like bodybuilding or some sort of fitness modeling, I don't think counting calories is the best or first approach. If someone really likes that and enjoys it, likes the details, then that might be appropriate. But for me, portion sizes, which still relates to calories, is a better approach, an easier approach. And so on the back end of that, depending on what their goals are, then once you've built the habit and you have a good understanding of what a healthy meal consists of and what portions you need to take in, once that's established, then you don't need to think about it a whole lot more. And then you'll also notice how you fluctuate in body weight and body composition to then change those things and readjust over time. And for someone on the calorie counting side, again, it's usually very specific for a specific outcome. And then after that, I don't recommend continuing to do so, unless someone is motivated by that. But it's I think a fine line. between someone enjoys that and it getting too strict and they get too attached to that.
So I want to go into a very controversial topic.
Here we go.
We're not going to go too deep into this because I know, it can be what we're saying, like a rabbit hole. Yeah. So, but I think everybody, into lifting weights or, building muscle, it's, we are all obsessed with the protein. How much protein should I take? And again, I hear from good professionals that I trust them and I follow their advice, and most of the things they know they say, because they're more professionals than me. I'm just an amateur on all this. But I hear other people that I really respect and saying completely the opposite. Not something slightly different, but completely the opposite. So apparently the latest studies, it says that if I remember well, it's 0.7, 0.8 grams per kilo, not per pound. Either way, even if we put it per pound, it's way lower than what I hear out there. So a lot of people are taking between 1.5 or 2 grams per pound. Some other people say per kilo. So there's a lot of diversity and different opinions on this.
Big spectrum.
At the end of the day, the latest studies say the opposite. So it's kind of hard. Who should I listen to? So what did you hear about this? What is your, not just your opinion, but what have you seen out there? You just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. It makes sense, protein building block of muscle, that you'd want to make sure you get enough of it. And then from my perspective, there's the extreme side on the muscle building culture, bodybuilding, where it's just hey, you can't get enough of this stuff, right? And the window, and that's kind of been dismissed as well, where it's not as important to have it immediately after. And then there's the other side though, where people that maybe don't strength train and probably don't get enough. And my understanding is that it's somewhere around 0.7 grams per pound and 1.6 grams per kilo. And much less than what was discussed in the former years. It was much higher than that. And that's my understanding. That's from a big meta-analysis looking at all those studies saying that there is no benefit beyond that for muscle gain. And so that's the minimum, and that's where you're going to see the sweet spot. And then beyond that, pulling out from the science, I always encourage people to just experiment. Just see what works best for you. Are you putting on muscle mass or are you not? Right? And give yourself some time, of course, but play with things. Play with the proteins that you're consuming. Play with when you're consuming them, with the amount. But as far as I know, it's 0.7-ish grams per pound, 1.6 per kilo is the sweet spot.
Yeah, because if we understand how science evidence work, we cannot take, in theory, we cannot take personal experience as an evidence for the average, of people. So, but it doesn't mean that for my body type, my lifestyle, where I live, what I can buy or get out there, because depending on the country you live, you might not be able to get certain things, right? You might not even have them at all, or it can be too expensive, depending on your finances. I guess, somehow we have to adapt all these things, to what we can get or what we need, right? So under my understanding, people with different body types, my process protein faster or slower. Is that a thing? Because I read something about it, but I'm not sure to understand. If your body can handle proteins or synthesize proteins faster than other people, do you need to take more, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, I don't know I'm not too familiar with the science behind that, but I am familiar with a thing called biochemical individuality. Some people just don't break fat down very well. Some people break it down very well and can utilize that much easier.
My understanding, proteins, we especially when we're lifting weights or people lifting weights, we always think protein and muscle, right? Like we need protein to build up muscle. That's obvious, but we forget that not only is for muscle, it helps to have a healthy skin, immune system, the mood, and a long, etc. So it's not just only for the muscle. So when we take a protein, it has to distribute in different places in different ways, right?
Yeah, it's a very important nutrient. And again, we got these two sides, right? And people that might not be as into or well versed in strength training maybe don't pay as much attention to it. And one population that I've been working with a lot of clients that are aging. And one thing to consider there, which was very eye-opening for a lot of these people, is as you age, usually your total calorie consumption goes down slightly the older you get. You're just not eating as much food. Maybe you are less active and you don't need to eat as much food. However, if you want to maintain the muscle mass you've achieved, your protein needs to make up a larger portion of your total calories, or else, and we know that's an issue, right? Sarcopenia, like muscle loss, muscles atrophy if you don't use them, and also if you don't get enough protein. And so a very important one for the aging population to make sure they're getting enough, but more importantly, that it makes up a larger portion of their caloric intake if that caloric intake is going down over time to maintain the muscle mass.
Interesting. I was watching something the other day, another of these podcasts, and the person was saying that there's not really any study, at least that he could find. He couldn't find any study that's saying that we have to take a protein, either building muscle or whatever, that we could get amino acids directly instead of protein. I don't know what you heard about that or your personal opinion.
Yeah. So essential amino acids. Yeah. To me, not something I've dug into on the research, but in terms of a supplement, I always look at it as it's a supplement. So I would always recommend a whole foods diet. But if it is, these unique situations for people, if it's hard to find good quality protein, if someone's having a challenge getting enough protein, like the demographic I just talked about, the aging population, like if they're really finding it hard to consume the amount of protein they need to maintain muscle mass, then this can be a great option. And also essential amino acids versus a protein is like you're just getting the essentials, right? You're not getting the other things. But that again is why I would always point people to a whole foods diet first if it's possible, because there's so many other nutrients that you're getting in a diet versus just supplementing something.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. So another controversial topic here is talking about resistance training, right? That people think, or lifting weights, let's say, for example, people think it's either for bodybuilders or athletes, right? So those ones who are not into lifting weight, or they're not really pursuing or building muscle, they think, I'm not going to lift weights because that's a waste of time, and I rather do cardio or biking or whatever they do, right? And we have the other side, like bodybuilders saying, well, I'm not going to run, stretch, or do things, because I want to focus on building muscle, and that can interfere with my progress in building muscle. So what do you think about this? I think there's a misconception on both sides.
Yes.
And I'd like to know your opinion about this. And so just guide us a little bit through this.
Yeah, and it's funny because I early on was educated by some strength coaches who were very much on the side of like cardio is a waste of time. And I think now, it's great now, there's so much good information. Sometimes too much information, but so much information that really shows the benefits of both. And they don't have to be, Yeah. Ideally, you're getting a combination of both of them because they both have their benefits. And they both can benefit one another if you're tackling them. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to jump into specifically, but someone that's just doing cardio, obviously a great cardiorespiratory system and great metabolism for that reason. But if they're not getting any strength training, they could lose muscle mass, bone density becomes an issue. And on the other side with the strength training, cardiorespiratory for obvious reasons, right? All the many benefits we get from that. If you're not training that, you might tap into that a little bit, but if you're not specifically taxing that system in the right way, as well as the high intensity, like zone 5 stuff, you're not developing that system, and you're just losing out on a ton of health benefits.
I was thinking for something very, very specific, like again, like people who, I mean, I talk to lots of my clients, and some people are not into lifting weights at all, because what I was saying, they most of the times they think, that's a waste of time. I don't care about muscle, blah blah. And I tell them, well, for what I know, like, we can get huge benefits of lifting weights. And one of them, for example, some of the studies say that lifting weights helps you to get stronger bones. I don't know if that's the right term.
Bone density. Yeah.
Oh, bone density. So something that it might be hard to get through other exercises. And that's nothing to do with exactly building muscle, right? Even though you might put a little bit of muscle or tone, your muscles. But what do you think about that? Or have you heard about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think we kind of touched on that before, that each have their benefits and they're going to show up in different ways. But with strength training specifically, the muscle mass, the bone density, strength training, I know we might touch on it later a little bit, but is a good way to still maintain full range of motion through your joints, right? And how that shows up, especially if you're looking at how we age and keeping that health span, so to speak.
I don't want to go into that because I have some questions related to that, so we're going to see that in a moment.
Yeah, so there's just so many benefits that they each bring to the table that, again, I think it's important to find what people like and what's easy to implement. And so maybe if someone loves running, it's like, okay, that's your thing. How can we complement that? It's not like you have to give up running and now just do strength training, but how can we expose you to enough strength training so you can get the benefits of strength training, which can also, show up in your running in terms of injury prevention and all these things. Or vice versa. If someone doesn't like doing the cardios, it's like, okay, are there activities we could implement that challenge those specific systems without you having to, people think, oh, cardio, it's like I got to be outside running or I got to be on a treadmill. It's not necessarily the case, right? You can find an activity that hopefully you enjoy and still get the benefit of training those.
So what is your professional opinion on, let's say, for example, somebody who wants to build a muscle mass, and that's his or her main goal, and it's like, I want to just put more muscle, like a lot more muscle in it. It's going to take me years, whatever. How much cardiovascular exercises can interfere in that person's progress? Because I know it could interfere, if you're kind of like a 50-50, it might take forever, to build a muscle. And for what I've heard, if you want to focus on get bigger, you should focus on get bigger, and try to, if you're going to do cardiovascular exercises, kind of do it, for example, in a day that you're not lifting weights, instead of doing it in the same day. I heard so many different opinions, so I want to know your approach to this, or your professional opinion.
Yeah. So for me, I always lean towards health. So usually if someone is just comes to me and they're strictly just bodybuilding and I don't care about that stuff, I might not be the right person for you, first and foremost. But then it's a discussion and seeing how, again, I think, we could talk about something. It's always how it shows up for that person. But if someone was primarily focused on muscle building, then we would find the minimum effective dose of cardio, because cardio can still show up for bodybuilders. It's the engine that we rely on. And so if they don't have a very built up engine, so to speak, then they're going to get fatigued during their sessions and they won't be able to maybe handle the same amount of volume if they had a good cardiorespiratory baseline. And so finding out, one, where they are, where they stand, and then how, what's their schedule like, how much time can they dedicate to all this, and then, finding the minimum effective dose where we get some benefits in cardio, but we're maximizing the benefits of muscle building.
So I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying something very interesting between hypertrophy and strength, which both of them overlap, but at the same time you can separate them, right? Like the same way bodybuilders and powerlifters train in a completely different way, right? You can see powerlifters, like resting for 5 or 7 minutes or whatever, and bodybuilders, I mean, when they get exhausted, you have to rest a little bit, to be able to lift again. But yeah, it's completely different approach, right? And so the thing is that you don't need to be super strong, or you don't need a lot of strength to build muscle, right? But at the same time, you don't need a lot of muscle to just be strong. But they were saying that once you reach the peak of your strength, you might need more muscle in order to get stronger, right? So, I'm a big fan of Mike Mentzer. I know he's probably the most controversial bodybuilder in history, I would say. And I know he did a lot of eccentric things, but I think his approach was very, very interesting. And he was capable of minimizing the number of reps, number of sets. And he was looking instead of, okay, we know how much, we can, how many sets we can do, But what if we bring it to the minimum to see what is the minimum we can do, which might be different for you or for me. Yeah. And with that minimum to see, I don't have to do like 20 sets or whatever. I mean, exaggerating obviously, but what is the minimum to stimulate the muscle? So that way the muscle can understand, hey, I want you to grow. So you don't have to go up to 3 sets or 4 or 5 sets. It depends on every person, I understand. But that was very, very interesting approach. So let's see what is the minimum and we build it from there. So 1 rep probably is not enough to stimulate the muscle. 2 reps might not be enough, and on until he found a number that it worked for him. And I mean, we all know, the results with him and with hundreds of other people that he trained, or even other people after he died, they followed his system, like Dorian Yates. I don't think we can question Dorian Yates at all, even though he adopted the Mike Mentzer's training, right? But anyway, so the thing is, what is interesting is that he was capable of working on this strength with his system. At the same time, he was working, building muscle. So what do you think about this? Like, is it possible to do that, like building strength, or will you build strength before start building a little bit of muscle, or what do you think about this?
We can go down a rabbit hole here, right? Okay. There's so many different approaches, and there's some clear science there. For me, initially, I would, if someone hasn't been exposed to strength training, resistance training, I would be on the higher rep range side, building muscle first. And a big reason for that is not just the building muscle, but the programming, the motor programming that happens. And also building some resilience in the other tissues before we go to heavier weights. So for me, I would start with higher reps, really build good movement patterns, and then over time expose them to those lower reps, those higher intensities when they're moving well and ready for it.
And I guess that before we even lift heavier weights, I guess the mechanics are important. And I guess it's really hard, to keep the fashion, if you don't, if you have too much weight, that you create too much momentum, or doing, correctly the movements, I guess is better, with lower weight and maybe more reps, until we get the mechanics properly.
That's it. And it always depends on the person, again, right? Their background and any injury history. And there could be other pieces that also need to be built up before. And so, yeah, I think that's an important piece to consider.
Okay, so another thing that I'm curious about is how about whatever the training that you do or the program that you put on somebody, do you change it, or how often do you change the exercises to that person, and so that way the body doesn't adapt, to the exercise?
So again, it will vary on the person. In general, I will change it every 4 weeks. So yeah, the variability and adapting to the program happens. Sorry, the adaptability happens very quickly, and so we want to change it up enough. Not huge changes. Sometimes there's some bigger changes, but they're not drastic changes. We're building a sequence, so one program leads into the another. But usually about 4 weeks. Sometimes longer than that, though. If again, I see a lot of people that are not athletes and they like to mix it up and keep it interesting. And so a 4-week window works well there where we get good adaptations, but it keeps it interesting. For some people, though, we will go longer in a phase.
Interesting. So let's jump to another topic that I'm very interested in. I don't really have much knowledge on this, and I think it's very, very interesting and important for everybody. And I don't think we do enough of this. And it's mobility and flexibility. Can you define or give us a definition more or less of mobility and flexibility? And then we see, these two concepts either overlap or the difference between them. So let's just start with the definition of them.
Okay, and this is my definition. It might not be
it was very professional, so I believe you.
Yeah. My definition, my understanding of it is flexibility is more so to do with the joint range of motion and the muscle's ability to go through that range of motion. And so more so passive. And mobility is the active range of motion, but incorporates a lot of different things, coordination and stability through a given range of motion.
And would you give priority to one over the other one, or
so
you pretty much have to work on them?
Removing those words for a second, just because they can kind of tie together in a way. Through my own experience and early on with clients, again, and kind of shifting more to like a general health perspective, like getting people to move well first, you start to encounter all these movement restrictions, which is a flexibility, mobility issue for a lot of people, right? Not always, but sometimes, that's an issue. And so I definitely try and take a look at where people have big restrictions in range of motion, and that is a big priority as we get started, and continues to be depending on how big those restrictions are. And I'll incorporate different methods to tackle that. Now, the biggest thing for me in terms of flexibility, and the way I define it as it being more passive, is I might want to, depending on the person and depending on what we're looking at, I might want to tackle that in more of a passive way and just open up that range first and foremost. But through some of the different modalities I've been exposed to, thing of greater importance to me is having control and strength through that range of motion. So it's not just passive, because if I can move into a range of motion, but I have zero control of that range of motion, that to me is not, you're not as capable. And so, yes, I want to open up that range of motion, but I want to make sure you're stable and strong through that range of motion as well.
Okay, makes sense. Another question, I was talking to a client the other day as well, and I asked him, hey, I'm going to start this podcast, and so do you have any questions? And he asked me something very interesting. Hi, Sabo. So he was like, well, you can ask how about our aging? How do we keep strength, through the aging process? Because I understand the older we get, the less testosterone we have. So how do we do with the aging? Because we unfortunately we can't stop that, right?
No. Well, I think first is if you're not doing something to build strength, incorporate something to build strength, and then continue to do that. Be consistent with because again, the body's adapting. So if you want to get strong or stay strong, you need to expose your body to the things that will make it do that. Then, of course, depending on where you're at, there might be certain modifications. But this is, again, where I think the mobility thing is really important. I've seen a lot of people come to me not even close to being middle-aged and already have big restrictions in mobility. If you don't address that, that's going to continue to close off. More importantly, if you start to load that up and you're trying to build strength on that, well, then you're kind of fortifying that lack of mobility. And so this is why I find it's such an important piece, is like really making sure people can move through these full ranges and then strengthen those full ranges. But, and again, they don't have to be separated. Sometimes you can load someone to get them through the range of motion, but oftentimes, like just observing trainers that might not be as experienced, is they'll tend to sometimes load people that don't have that range of motion yet, and trying to build too much strength in a restricted range. And in my opinion, then you're just further restricting that range, and they're not gonna get there. But yeah, to answer your question, is you need to, if you're not already, expose yourself to the stimulus that's going to make your body adapt to get strong, because you can get stronger at any age. I just started with a lady in her 70s. The only thing she's ever been exposed to prior to coming to see me was like a little like She's Fit machine circuit training for like 6 months. Nothing. And the progress she's made in training just once a week, she does a few things at home on her own, but just trains once a week, is unreal.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just...
How old is she?
70, in her 70s.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so it doesn't matter when you start, but just, be smart about it. Maybe go see a professional if you've never done any of this stuff before, but expose yourself to the stuff that's going to get you stronger in the right way.
So I don't know if you remember, we did a photo shoot a long time ago, and one of the photos I was taking of you was just like standing on your hands and using the rings and all that stuff. So if I want to do that, I don't know if that has to do more with the calisthenics or something like that. If somebody wants to get into that, how do you start? Because obviously you cannot just go right to do, jump into do the exercise like that. I guess there's a progression until you build the strength in your core and the positions and everything. How do you approach to that if somebody wants to get into those exercises?
Yeah, so then again, taking a look at who the person is, what their background is, what their starting point is, getting a good idea of where they're at and what things they would like to do, because calisthenics, gymnastics, strength training, it's like there's so many things you could expose yourself to. Like technically a push-up is a form of body weight strength training or a calisthenics move. But then, there's a spectrum, and then you get to like the rings and the complex strength skills that are there. So understanding who the person is, where they want to go, and then building a plan from there. But oftentimes, like that was one of the biggest things that exposed me to my lack of flexibility and mobility, was wanting to get into gymnastics strength training. And then getting into certain positions and being like, holy shit, I'm so stiff and this is so closed off, like I'm not even close. And then going down that rabbit hole for myself. But yes, seeing where people's starting point is and then working on the pieces in order to build up. But sometimes it could just be the right regression of a certain skill, right? Like a push-up, if you can't do a full push-up from the ground, well, maybe we elevate your hands to a certain place and you can do them from there, and we start there. Of course, for some of the other, like a handstand or some of these other skills, there's a lot of other preparation that needs to take place before you start any kind of variation. But That would be the general approach.
I'm gonna post a few photos of I took of you, so they can see what you can do. Would you give priority to one over the other one, or what would you recommend?
So
to do?
Not so much to me. Again, I'm more concerned with having strength through that whole range. That's the end goal. Now, how we get there, yes, I'll use different modalities. Sometimes it is more static stretching, some passive stuff, not a ton of passive stuff. That can be great for like a recovery technique, like a passive static stretch. For the most part, the things I incorporate will be a little bit more active. And then that's where you just we're using a lot of different things, sometimes just strength training through an entire range if they have that, but there's a lot of different things we can implement to regain that control and that range of motion.
And I know a lot of people into more and building muscle might be thinking, should I stretch? If I want to build a muscle, it's important to stretch before, between exercises, at the end of the lifting weights. Is it important? It's something we should do, and how and when it will be the most important time to do this?
Yeah. So again, it would depend on the individual and what they're wanting. I'm going to speak to it in pretty general terms. So initially, we would include some sort of dynamic stretching in the warm-up, in the preparation, so that your body is ready to jump into that movement. So initially it can be a little bit more joint specific and a little more isolated, and then it starts looking more and more like the movements you're going to perform. So if I'm doing a squat, I might do some isolated knee and hip stuff, maybe some ankle stuff, and then I'm doing some sort of dynamic warm-up that mimics a squat. Maybe it is just prepping the squat if that's appropriate for the person. Then within the session, there could be specific work we're doing, and this could be strength work. It doesn't have to be like a specific flexibility or mobility drill. It could be a variation like an RDL where we're stretching the hamstrings with load. That would be during the session. And then post-session, anything that you want to give a little bit more attention in terms of opening or in terms of like the cool down recovery, that would be a great place to implement some static stretching. And again, there's a lot of different ways to mix this stuff up, just like strength training. That would be a pretty general approach for someone wanting to implement some flexibility, mobility into their routine.
Okay, interesting. Makes completely sense. And we're getting closer to the end, but I wanted to ask you just a couple of questions to wrap this up. Lifestyle and health. I know that can mean a lot of things for different people, but what's your number one recommendation to achieve of what you think is a good balance in life? What would you call a good balance, and what advice would you give to somebody in general, to have a good balance?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Again, I think it depends on the individual, because what looks balanced for me might not be balanced for someone else. But it is these different components coming together to create and move you towards health or healthier. And so what does that look like for someone? It's like a lot of these things we talked about, some things we didn't talk about, like, there's the health window, so to speak. There's these main components we've talked about, but then there's all these other things, because we're biopsychosocial beings, right? Like our relationships affect our health, our environment affects our health, our sleep, like all these things. And so having those, and I think they're always in flux, but having first and foremost an awareness of how these things show up in your life, which things are way out of whack and need some attention, and trying to kind of rein them back in. And then that's kind of the game, is like trying to find some balance where you need the most balance, and then constantly playing with that, because that's life, right? Nothing's ever static or stays perfect, and I don't think perfect is realistic either. But yeah, having some awareness about you and your life and what's going to serve you the most in this moment in life, and then doing what you can to try and bring those things to a healthy balance for you. Hopefully that was.
Yeah. I mean, I completely understand that the question, leaves so many doors open, to different interpretations. But I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we pretty much, everybody knows, what balanced life should mean. But I guess, each person might take different.
In terms of the number one recommendation, I think it's just awareness around it, more awareness around what that looks like for you and what you.
That's a very interesting one, because I find that quite difficult. Like awareness, we're so busy with a lot of things, work, family, a lot of things. Even though we try to do our best, to stay healthy, whatever that means for each one. Awareness is a very difficult one. I consider myself a healthy person in general, with the food and exercise, and still sometimes, oh my God, I'm not doing the cardio I should be doing, or nothing at all most of the times, and I'm not aware, that I'm lacking of something very, very important, right? And I consider myself in general, a healthy person. So, and what would be your number one recommendation? Or just a few options here, because just one is going to be difficult. Of one not to do or stop doing right away if you want to have, some sort of longevity or, like a healthy life.
Yeah, that's a.
I mean, I guess it's a pretty obvious one. Stop smoking, stop drinking like crazy,
For sure, the obvious. I think a big one for people is stop being inconsistent. Stop. If this is you, again, some people it might not apply to as much, but I think, again, if we can, sometimes we think if we don't do the thing full on, then we shouldn't do it at all. But consistency over time is the most important thing. And again, it might look different for different people and different aspects, but if you can just do the minimum effective dose, as we talked about earlier, on whatever it is, and just try and stay as consistent as possible. I think that is, a key piece for continuing that trajectory over time.
I mean, I've seen, many studies that it shows, direct evidence of small amount of exercise, can be running, lifting weights, whatever it is, but keeping the consistency. It's whatever that consistency, it can be every 2 or 3 days, it can be once a week, it's better than nothing. Whatever it is, it shows better results than on and off for a long period of time, right?
100%. And I've just seen it in clients. And again, we all get busy, but if you can, make a commitment to stay consistent, whatever that looks like. Even you said, it's hard with the cardio, or you didn't have the awareness. Again, awareness maybe first, and then some consistency, but not making it this big task, because we all have a lot going on. So maybe it is, I'm sure you've heard this before, but take the stairs instead of the elevator. But these simple, these simple things that are really simple, people wash them off. But that simple change of making that decision is now daily you're incorporating cardio, and that's a start, and that starts to build. And I think that is, over time, shows up in a big way.
I completely agree. So, okay, so I think we're done here, and it's been
kicking me out.
Kicking you out. Literally, we're closed. So thank you very much for coming here. I can put in the description, how people can reach you out, and if they want some, personal training with
or
with
any
you.
other questions, if anything pops up from what we discussed, be happy to answer
absolutely.
any questions.
So I'll put your contact information if they're interested, or you're even interested in getting more clients, because I know you're quite busy already. It's been an honor having you here.
Thanks for having me, man.
So again, you came back to the hair salon in a different way.
I need a cut now.
So finally we made it. So thank you so much, and
You're welcome.
I hope to have you here again. and not just for cutting your hair, but to do another
That'd be awesome.
episode.
Yeah, be happy to come back.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
okay.
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a wrap. Yay!
Nothing was recording.